Hey y'all, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this we're going to be covering Lords of the Fallen in a review. We're going to be talking about the ups and downs of this game, basically what's good about it, what's bad about it, and everything in between. I do have a lot of opinions on this game. There are times where I had an absolute blast with it, but there's a lot of frustration that goes along with it too. We're going to keep this mostly spoiler free. Let's get into the details. This is the tutorial boss, by the way. I'm not going to show what happens after the boss here because there is a spoiler for a boss that appears after this one. I will leave that up to you guys. And then later in this video, I'm going to show you basically one of the better bosses in the game that's in the early game. And then one of the bosses that I think is kind of like a lame duck boss. Not a very good boss by design or not a very fun fight. And then we're going to talk about the differences in the boss fights during Lords of the Fallen. So I said it in the title, right? I talked about how emotional this game can be in the sense of ups and downs. I don't mean emotional in like an emotional way, but in terms of how the actual game goes and how you progress towards this game, there's going to be so many times where it's frustrating, and then there's going to be times where you're going to have a ton of fun. We're going to start by showing off the central hub area here and giving you an idea of what that's like. So the central hub area of Lords of the Fallen is actually one of the best parts in my opinion about the game. It's one of the better parts about the game. So throughout the entire journey, much like the original Dark Souls, a lot of the places that you end up in Lords of the Fallen will end up bringing you back to the central hub, and they have a unique and really cool way of getting back to that area, and I did like that by design. Yeah, it's really cool how everything basically leads back to the central hub. By the way, if you want to start out strong in Lords of the Fallen, a Radiance build, which is what I am here, because one of the early swords you get in the game is absolutely fantastic, can make the game a lot easier. So if you're thinking about what class to pick, picking a Radiance build, which is essentially magic, is a solid option. One thing to mention, by the way, is this game had terrible performance at launch. I originally had bought it on Xbox Series X, and it barely played. The frame rates were so bad it actually gave me a headache. I had to return the game, unfortunately. Then I ended up buying it for PS5, but they patched the game a ton since then, and it's been so much better. Sure, there's frame rate dips, we're going to talk about that, but they're nowhere near as bad as they were at launch. But another fortunate thing is that they've been patching the game like crazy, and not only have they been patching the game like crazy, it was announced today, by the time this video will be out, it'll be announced a day ago, that there's going to be a free extension to the game, essentially. They're going to be adding weapons, armors, a whole bunch of different things, including more quest lines to Lords of the Fallen for free. Now, there's this area in the game called Umbral, and essentially you get this lamp that can take you to another world that's essentially a map on top of the original map, and this did cause a lot of the performance issues, especially at launch. And as you can see at the central hub here, you can actually only see this merchant by going into Umbral, and Umbral is essentially an area of the dead. So you have a whole entire area of the dead where you fight a whole bunch of regular enemies on top of the regular map itself, and it will infinitely spawn mobs, and you're going to see that later. We're going to talk about that, how it's a little bit of an issue, and how it did cause a lot of frame rate issues, especially when the game launched. So this thing here is a vestige, which is basically a bonfire, and when you go to these you can travel to different areas of the game, and you get something called vestige seeds as well, and you could use those on these umbral flower beds to basically, for yourself, make a temporary vestige that you can travel from and rest at. So the best thing about Lords of the Fallen 2023, the button mapping on spells. This is the single best thing in the game, and it's absolutely fantastic. I love this. So when you're using a spell, or a catalyst essentially, you're going to be able to button map everything so that you have different spells. Basically, for me, I'm using PlayStation 5, you would hold down L2, and then you have a map for R1, R2, and X, square, etc. to use for different spells. I think you can map a total of 3, which is absolutely awesome and makes it so much easier rather than changing them like with the up arrow that we're used to in Souls games. Yeah, instead of repeatedly hitting the D-pad, you're going to be able to button map all your spells, and I love that. I think that's something that Souls games should pick up. It's great, it's very useful, and it's something as Magic users that we really like. It's something they should definitely add, because it would be really cool if we had the ability to button map spells, rather than constantly using the same exact button to switch through them. So it's time to talk about one of the downsides of Lords of the Fallen. One of the things that I don't like at all, by the way, actually one of the things is right there, is that when you're hit by an enemy, you seem to have no poise and you can fly across the map. It's very easy to fall off stuff, and the rolling and attack speed is much faster. We will talk about that as we go on. But the bad part, the mobs. So especially when you're in Umbral, you're going to have mobs that are chasing you down all the time, and in the beginning you may think, oh, I'll fight this whole bunch of mobs, I'll repeatedly fight the same enemies, and it won't be a big deal because I'll just get past them. Well, the thing is, especially in Umbral, they tend to keep spawning over and over and over again, and later in the game you could literally have like 5, 7 dogs chasing you at the same time and a whole bunch of the same enemies basically on your screen, which sometimes will even lower your frame rate because it gets so excessive. Yeah, the mobs itself are that bad sometimes. They do get really frustrating, and anybody that's picked up Lords of the Fallen probably thinks right away that one of the main issues with the game itself is how aggressive the mobs are in terms of how much they follow you and how many there are on your screen at one time, and how you basically will start running past all of them later in the game. Now, this game has a couple very good bosses, but then it has a lot of bad bosses too. For those that are looking for specifically only really great boss fights that are incredibly challenging, this game probably doesn't offer that. Now, Paeta that you're going to see on screen here on Menu Game Plus is probably one of the harder bosses and the more mechanically difficult ones, especially when you're starting out. But after her, the game opens up, it gets a little too easy at times, and we're going to show a boss after this one that's much more underwhelming. This boss, Paeta, is really cool. By the way, the parry window in this game is fantastic. The parry window will give you a lot of time. It's one of the most forgiving parries in any game, any Souls-like game there is. You have a lot of time to get the parry out, to be able to get the critical hit in. That part is, I guess, kind of a little bit quicker. It's not Elden Ring's version of critical hits where they sit there for a while, but you have enough time to parry and then to follow up. That part of it is very well balanced. Even me, who absolutely sucks at parrying, I am fine with it in this game because it's just very easy to do, and it's almost like Golden Parry from Elden Ring, where you have a little bit wider of a window, it seems, to be able to make that hit, to essentially hit the parry and then follow up with the critical hit. Now, the sound itself, though, on the parry, not a fan of. It does sound weird. They did add it last minute into the game. The sound on the parry is definitely one of the underwhelming parts of the combat. That being said, this fight's absolutely awesome. When you jump into Lords of the Fallen, you're going to enjoy this fight pretty much no matter who you are because it's one of the better fights in the game, and there is one fight towards the end of the game, by the way, that's also absolutely fantastic, that reminded me a lot of this one, except more of a late game version. So much like the mobs and the level design, by the way, I didn't really get into the level design, but the level design itself is fine. Some of the areas don't look the best, at least in my opinion. They can be bland at times, but other areas in the game are really cool to look at, and the graphics actually are quite good when the frame rate's not dropping. That being said, the bosses are much like the mobs. There's a lot of ups and downs. Some really bland bosses. We're going to talk about one of the bad ones here soon. And then, of course, with the mobs too, sometimes they can be alright, but sometimes they can be so overwhelming that it makes parts of the game unenjoyable. So after the boss, by the way, there's this thing that you could basically, you use your lamp and then you soul flay it, it's called, and after you do that, you can get these items that can then be used to buy stuff from a remembrance standpoint, just like Elden Ring where you can get boss weapons and stuff. Don't forget to do that. You can only do that in Umbral after the bosses, but after you beat them, be sure to grab that. You'll get those Umbral scourings, which you can then trade for remembrance stuff like weapons and boss armor. So here's another early game boss, and one of the ones that is definitely on the lamer side in my opinion, and here's the issue with some of the bosses that aren't that great in the game, and even some of the ones at times that feel good but the mechanics of them feel kind of weird. There's this thing in this game where a lot of the bosses can be gimmicky and or basically make you wait to attack. Yeah, so some bosses will have things in the area that you need to basically soul flay and stuff, and then other bosses will have mechanics that make you wait to attack, and certain bosses, like there's one later in the game that's on a horse, you're just going to have to wait, and one that's on a dragon, that the dragon's invincible, and you have to wait that out too. And I'm not sure who thought in the development cycle that it was a good idea to have all these waiting moments in boss fights that kind of interrupt the flow of the game. And it happens kind of frequently too. It's not a rare event. A lot of the bosses do have that kind of gimmicky feel to it, and it almost feels like certain parts of the game thought that it was a good idea to make the game more difficult, to include more mobs and more gimmick fights, as opposed to bosses that have difficult combination movesets that you would have to learn. And that's definitely a common mistake that this game makes fairly often. The bosses themselves could have been more like Paeta, and one of the later game bosses that particularly absolutely stands out as well. I'm not going to mention the name or spoil anything there, but there is a later game boss, as I mentioned, that is very good. I really enjoyed that boss fight. By the way, if you're wondering the quality of the video being a little iffy in terms of how it looks, I usually record 4K, but for this video I just did it on a regular old 180p TV because at the time I just felt like it would be easier to do, and I didn't want to take up space on what would amount to essentially a review. However, if you want to see Lords of the Fallen builds, definitely let me know in the comments below, and of course those would be in 4K. Yeah, and all these clips were recorded on PlayStation. I am on PlayStation 5, and on PlayStation 5, by the way, console, it is dumbed down a little bit. If you have a PC with great settings, I do have a solid PC that could easily run this game at pretty much all the max settings. However, I have a lot on it, and I do a lot of recording for Elden Ring and stuff, so I didn't want to download this game on top of all that, especially if I was unsure I was going to like it, so I ended up getting it for PS5 after I had the issues on Xbox Series X. I'm going to make this review quick and spoiler-free for the most part, and I think I did a good job of that since we really only covered the first 2 hours or so of the game, and I want to talk about the end here as far as the actual game. The game itself is quite good. It has a lot of potential. There's a whole bunch of free content coming for it as well, and I think that's a huge bonus. However, the mobs, some of the level design choices are a little bit iffy, and then the fact that about half of the bosses feel a little bit gimmicky, I'm not so much a fan of. So would I buy Lords of the Fallen at full price again? I'm not sure if I'd buy it at full price, but if it goes on sale during the holidays, I think it's definitely worth a grab. If you're looking to kill some time before Elden Ring DLC, this game is definitely fun, and there is more free content on the way. The final review is a 7.5 out of 10. It's quite good. Be sure to sub.